The Camino Portugues is the second most popular of the famous pilgrim paths to Santiago de Compostela, that famous cathedral city in northwest Spain where legend has it the remains of St. James the Apostle are interred. Historically, this 625-kilometre plus trail starts from Lisbon in Portugal and travels due north to Porto, then on to the Spanish border at Tui, before finally arriving at Santiago de Compostela. In 2014, over 35,000 pilgrims gained to Compostela from the Camino Portugues. The most popular starting point on this route was from Tui on the Spanish border. 11,500 pilgrims started their journey from here. Over 10,000 started their journey from Porto. Less than 1,500 pilgrims actually commenced from the capital city itself. Over the last 4 years, the Pilgrims Organisation of Portugal, called the Via Lusitana, has been upgrading the infrastructure and the waymarking on the route to encourage more pilgrims to start their Camino from Lisbon. Many more albergues have opened, and the yellow arrows are now more plentiful along this route, especially from Santarém. The terrain is mostly flat, and the route has a fair amount of road walking, a combination of quieter roads and footpaths, especially between Lisbon and Porto. Lisbon is a lively, buzzing city and the capital of Portugal, with a population in excess of 500,000 people, and it lies on the western Iberian Peninsula on the Atlantic Ocean and the River Tejo. It's now called a world city because of its important role in the global economic system. Its spacious harbour is found sheltered in a large estuary, and this geographical position made the city an important seaport for trade between the Mediterranean and Europe. Today, the waterfront is alive with activity, and the many docks and wharves can accommodate even the largest ships. Lisbon is also hugely popular with cruise ships, and an estimated 400,000 passengers visit this popular spot every year to enjoy the warmer climate and the wonderful tourist attractions. It's one of the oldest cities in the world, predating cities such as Rome, Paris, and even London, and it boasts a very colourful history, having been conquered and reconquered over the ages and suffering from earthquakes and the Great Fire that all but destroyed it. It's nicknamed the City of Seven Hills, and first-time visitors will appreciate the army of colourful trams that clang and clatter through the undulating streets of this bustling metropolis. On one of the hilltops overlooking the city is the impressive Moorish castle of St. George, which is a relic of Portugal's medieval times. The Cathedral of St. Mary Maior is found in the city's old quarter, and this is the starting point of our Camino. It's here we can obtain our credencial, that passport-like document we will need to stay in the albergues along the way and gain a Compostela at our journey's end. It's advisable to check beforehand the times when the credencial can be obtained from inside the cathedral. Our first yellow arrow to start our pilgrimage and point us on the right way is found at the base of the church. It's an early start on our first day, and we exit the city from the cathedral onto the back streets of the old town, past the empty sleeping trams that will come to life soon, fill up with tourists and travellers alike. The trail eventually heads down alongside the river, and we're walking past one of the biggest container ports on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Leaving the industrial sector behind us, we pass through the Park of Nations, a site that was the former ground of the Expo 98, and it's now one of Lisbon's more upmarket areas, boasting many attractions and eateries along the esplanade. And here we find some welcome arrows to assure us we're on the right path. Ahead of us, the amazing Vasco da Gama Bridge. At more than 17 kilometres long, this is the longest bridge in all of Europe. And eerily, it seems to disappear into the distance and into nowhere as it crosses the huge estuary. From under the bridge, the trail heads into some welcome nature and a nice walk along the riverbed. The first part of today has few opportunities to refuel, so at the first village, be sure to stop for some refreshments and supplies. The second half of the stage is mostly on a bicycle and walking path that crisscrosses the railway track before finally arriving at Villafranca de Xira. The town has a pilgrim-friendly pension opposite the bus station, next to the railway. The walk today is 43 kilometres. An appealing option to shorten this day might be to take the metro to this marine park and save yourself over 7 kilometres of walking through the industrial port area of the city. The second stage of our Camino is to Azambuja, and that's just over 20 kilometres, and that's less than half the distance of that previous long day. Crossing the railway station, there's a pleasant walk between the river and the railway tracks. The morning's nature, however, soon disappears at the village of Vila de Reina, and the rest of our trail is on the asphalt. While the stage itself is mostly flat, the road walking will guarantee some sore feet at the journey's end. The last 8 kilometres are along the busy trunk road, the N3, before arriving at the bullring on the outskirts of the town. This small village has a recently opened albergue, which is found opposite the town hall and next to the church square. The journey to Santarém is over 34 kilometres, but today will be a welcome trip through the lush Alentejan plains. Newly ploughed fields and crops of fruit and vegetables are everywhere as we pass through some of Portugal's most fertile agricultural land. The trail itself is mainly on sandy paths and farm tracks that wind their way through the valley, running parallel to this great river. Just after halfway, we arrive at the village of Morgado, and it's important to resupply here because there's no more stops until we reach our final destination. Ahead of us in the distance, Santarém sits on top of a ridge overlooking the winding River Tejo. And after a long day's hiking, we reach this large town on a stiff uphill climb that's guaranteed to keep the heart racing. This fortress town is an important agricultural and cultural centre of Portugal. Santarém has a good hostel located just off the large roundabout and near the city's main square, and it's got numerous bars and restaurants for that evening meal. After 3 stages of our Camino so far, we have travelled more than 100 kilometres, and it's here at Santarém a pilgrim can detour to the famous shrine of Fatima. Our 4th stage is to Galega, and another long journey of 34 kilometres. The trail to exit Santarém can be confusing. Straight after leaving the town, the path again follows the river and stays to the left of the railway track. The Tajo is the longest river on the Iberian Peninsula, flowing from the Albaracan Mountains in Spain for over 1,000 kilometers before emptying in the huge estuary at Lisbon. Once again, our path meanders through dirt tracks, farm paths, with stretches of quiet country lanes as we enter the rich alluvial soils of this river. As with the previous day's hike, there's very little shade to be had, so a hat and a sunscreen are a must. Unfortunately, the last 10 kilometers of this long day are spent on the blacktop. Our day's end is the town of Galega, and it's often referred to as the capital of horses, and home to some of the country's most famous stud farms. We chose to stay in an impressive private albergue, some way out of the town, but still on the way, called Casa Saitano. The morning's walk to Tomar starts with a stroll through some quiet country lanes, accompanied by the ever-present birdsong, which has become a pleasant feature of our Camino. Just after leaving the village of Atalaya, the trail finally moves away from the river, entering a large eucalyptus forest. The eucalyptus trees have replaced the old incumbent oak trees, and they're mainly farmed for pulpwood. But because the forest will continually shed its bark, the markings on the trees can often disappear altogether. This is an easy spot to lose the trail, so it means being very watchful for any yellow pointers. We meander through some gently rolling hills before arriving at the Templar town of Tomar. This magical town in the centre of Portugal is famous for its Templar castle and the Convento de Cristo, which were the national headquarters of the Templar Knights in the Middle Ages. The castle itself sits high on a hill overlooking the town. These two World Heritage buildings are well worth a visit. The albergue is found in the main streets underneath the imposing castle. The sixth stage of the Camino is another long walk, over 32 kilometers, and much of it on quiet country lanes, through smaller hamlets as we leave the flat plains of Ribatejo behind us. Early into our hike, there's opportunities for refreshments in the village of Casas. But the last 20 kilometers of this stage have no facilities, so it's best to stock up in Tomar beforehand. There are several hills to ascend through mixed woodland, and the last part of this stage will again be on the road. Alvazare has a new albergue called the Pinheiro near the central square, and this can accommodate over 20 pilgrims. The walk to Habacal begins with a steep climb through the Serra dos Ariques, and there's some great views below us. From here, it's another hike through forests and valleys, past more small villages, until we arrive at the large town of Ansau and a perfect lunch stopover. The final trail to Habacal begins through pine and eucalyptus trees, meandering on country gravel paths, through more straggling hamlets, until we reach this historic Roman town. The town has accommodation at the Casa de Turismo, which offers pilgrims' rooms at special rates. The 8th stage of our Camino is another long journey, the day starting with some road walking as we navigate through 2 smaller villages, and we're soon on country paths with olive groves and vineyards for company, until we reach the town of Coimbra, which has, they say, the best preserved ruins in all of Portugal. The trail then is a mixture of quiet country roads on more gentle terrain. We climb to the Alto de Santa Clara, as a large city of Coimbra, sitting majestically on the Mondego River, appears before us in the distance. A steep downhill takes us past the convent of Santa Clara, which has recently opened new facilities for the Camino pilgrims, and here there are a number of beds available. The city itself is still about 1 kilometre away, across the bridge that spans the river, and there are numerous pensions and hostels, should a pilgrim want to stay in the city itself. Coimbra is one of the highlights of the walk to Porto, with its many cultural artefacts, and imposing 13th century university, the oldest in the Western world. After only 8 days of our Camino, at Coimbra we have walked for almost 265 kilometres, averaging more than 30 kilometres each day. To exit the city of Coimbra, the Camino moves past the railway station, travelling alongside the river, before a quiet road leads us through a number of small villages. And here a mid-morning coffee stop is a reality. We are soon walking on a mixture of small country paths, and then some busier roads, so some care will need to be taken. The terrain is virtually flat, and we even have some short stages on an old Roman road. After the village of Santa Lucia, we head into another large eucalyptus forest, which is a welcome relief from the busy N1 highway. We leave the forest to join the tarmac and walk to the roundabout at the town's edge. Milhada is a busy town and once was a major crossroads in Roman times. The albergue here is on the other side of town in a hotel called Hilario, and that offers bunk beds for €10. This town is famous in Portugal for a dish called leitos, which is a spit-roasted, 1-month-old suckling pig. And in this town there are over 25 restaurants, bars and eateries that will provide you with this well-known delicacy. 10th stage of the Camino is to Agueda, which is just over 25 kilometers away. While there are scatterings of nature trails, there are also some industrial areas we'll have to trudge through. The market town of Anadia is a good coffee and breakfast stop, but from here on it's a mix of country lanes, footpaths and busy roads. Today's journey follows the path of the Sutima River, and Agueda is built on its banks. The albergue is located about a kilometre further along the other side of town, past the hospital, next to the Residencial Celeste, which is on the N1. On day 11, a footsore pilgrim will appreciate a much shorter trek, and today the walk to Albergaria is barely 16 kilometres. After a brief stint on some quiet smaller roads, we're walking on original Roman roads after the small village of Badacaes. We cross the Rio Marnell by way of a road bridge as the trail heads into a large eucalyptus forest. When we finally leave the forest, we follow a minor road to the roundabout that marks the entry into Albergaria. New refuge here is the De Teresa, and it's found in a tree-lined street just before we arrive at the town centre. For our accommodation, however, we're travelling another 3 kilometres along the way to a quiet retreat called the Casa Diocesana, which is run by the Sisters of Divine Providence and is mainly used for Fatima pilgrims. Day 12, Albergaria to Saint-Jaume de Madeira, is 30 kilometres long. The morning starts with a pleasant stroll through another forest of pine and eucalyptus. There are a number of larger villages to navigate through today, so supplies are not going to be a problem. We spend a lot of the day crisscrossing the railway line on our way to Oliveira de Azemas, a large, lively town with a population of over 12,000 inhabitants, and this is a great place to stop for lunch. Saint-Jaume de Madeira is reached by way of country roads and urban footpaths. The accommodation in the large town is best booked in advance, as in 2015 there was no albergue, and there are 2 main places to stay here, a hotel and a residencial, and very little else. Exiting this large town seems to take a long time walking on the footpaths, but eventually we trade the busy road for the quiet of nature and some more old Roman roads. A lot of the day is spent walking on the blacktop through the outer suburbs of Portugal's second largest city, Oporto. Oporto is the second largest city in Portugal, and it's one of the oldest European centres in the world. In 1996, its old city was registered as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. It's a great place to visit and even spend a few lazy days exploring an ancient town full of history and tradition. Its setting, nestled into the side of granite cliffs at the mouth of the River Douro, is nothing short of spectacular, with its mix of colourful houses and picturesque boats on either side of the water, giving it a real pirate's atmosphere. The city's name, of course, derives from that famous drink, and historically, boats would bring the harvest down the Douro from the wine fields upstream to Porto, where numerous bodegas transformed the grapes into the well-known spirit. And of course, a visit to Oporto wouldn't be complete without sampling the famous port wines in one of the many port houses by the side of the river in the Via Nova de Gaia. The old town in the Ribeira district is the heart of the city, with its monumental buildings, its museums, the famous Alhambra town hall, and the golden churches that lead to the medieval quarter along the river. The Porto Cathedral is located in the heart of the historical centre of the city, and it's a mixture of Romanesque, Baroque and Gothic architecture. For all those pilgrims starting their Camino in this city, a credencial can be obtained here during certain hours. The yellow arrows that start the journey north are found a few metres from the rear of the church. From the start of our Camino in Lisbon, we have travelled almost 400 kilometres to reach this magnificent city of Porto. Exiting this large city is on major roads with the fast Portuguese traffic, so a pleasant alternative for us is to take the metro to Mercado. Then we rejoin the yellow arrows at Matosinhos and travel along the promenade and enjoy a nice sea change. The promenade soon gives way to a boardwalk, and this runs virtually the entire trip of almost 24 kilometres to Via de Conde. The beach and the sea are a welcome relief from the previous day's hard slog. We pass through some fishing villages, and that'll be great for either breakfast or lunch. At Via de Conde, there are a number of pensions and hostels at which to stay. In the morning, we could take a bus to Vilarino and rejoin the Camino there. Probably the most important tip I could give a peregrino is to pack lightly. Take only what is really needed, because when one walks for 20 kilometers a day with a pack, after a while every 1 extra kilogram will feel like 5. Ideally, the pack should only weigh 1/10 of a person's body weight. Leave the hairdryer behind and be absolutely ruthless on your items. The forums and blogs are great places to see what other pilgrims recommend. Once in Villarino, the yellow arrows are plentiful. The trail from here starts to embrace more of the nature, and before long, the walk is on dirt pathways and quiet country roads. The route is well marked and it's on very gentle terrain. This stage to Rates from Villarino is just over 20 kilometres. Rates is a small village with a population of less than 3,000 inhabitants. But with a well-kept albergue. If it's unoccupied, the keys can be obtained from the single shop at the top of the road. The albergue has 3 large rooms with bunk beds, as well as a large kitchen and dining area, and it operates on a donativo basis for your stay. It also has a great outdoor area with its own museum. Some sound advice to anyone considering doing this pilgrimage is to pack some earplugs. Maybe several pairs might be necessary. The nights could well be filled with any number of strange and irritating noises, which might well be referred to as a snorchestra, a mix of sound produced by any number of heavyweight snorers, both males and females alike. Our next step, to Tamal São Pedro, there's a custom-built albergue that's some way from any shops or facilities. The journey, once again, is on quiet roads and paths. The route takes us through the large market town of Barcelos, where pilgrims may book into a pension or a hostel. And if you arrive on a Thursday, you could be part of the largest weekly market in all of Portugal. It's best to stock up here for supplies for that evening meal, as there's no shops between here and our destination for the night. The waymarking to the albergue can be a little bit confusing, so a watchful eye is needed to find the yellow pointers. The modern albergue of Tamal São Pedro is found after a small climb through an urban area. Albergues in Portugal are usually attended by a hospitalero, and in Tamal there are cooking facilities and a large number of clean, comfortable beds. The stage from Tamal São Pedro to Ponte de Lima, it's one of the prettier walks on this way to Santiago de Compostela. After Vitorino de Pairs and Portela, there's a long descent to the valley of the Rio Lima and on to Ponte de Lima. This popular town is set low in a rich valley surrounded by rolling granite hills covered with dense pine trees. On this stage, the urban footpath quickly changes to lush nature as the walk is through crops of green corn and vineyards. A good deal of Portugal's agriculture is based on small to medium-sized family farms, and these farms produce a wide variety of crops, including corn, barley, olives and green vegetables. The land in the north of Portugal is some of the most fertile in the whole country. The waymarking on this route is now very good, and evidence of freshly painted yellow arrows and an abundance of easily noticed malariums scattered all along the trail. The route alternates between natural pathways and quiet roads. Ponte de Lima is another market town, situated on the south bank of the river. As the name suggests, the bridge is the major landmark of this town, and the impressive Roman monument has 24 arches, 4 of which belong to the original Roman construction. This delightful town has a good number of trendy bars and cafes in its narrow streets, and some delightful old manor houses and palaces in the surrounding area. The albergue is found on the north bank of the river, across the bridge, and has a capacity of 60 bunk beds. Unfortunately, it doesn't open until late in the afternoon.
They're in the Camino Marathon.
Are they? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The stage to Rubaiyes is less than 20 kilometres, and the first part of it navigates along some pretty countryside, on cobblestone roads and dirt pathways, as it heads through the La Ruja Valley towards a tiny hamlet of Revolta. There are some picturesque views of the green Portuguese countryside as we cross the Rio La Bruja underneath the busy motorway. The yellow arrows take us up some winding tracks and country lanes before we arrive at a steep hillside climb. From here, we ascend the Alto Portela Grande, and at over 400 metres, this is by far the steepest part of our whole Camino.
Yep. Video. Yeah, I'm just videoing Mr. Frenchman. Hard.
We pass the Cruz des Franceses, a monument commemorating fallen French soldiers during the Peninsular Wars. At the peak of the rise over the steep hill, we come to a water fountain and a timely water replenishment.
Good.
The walk downhill in the nature leads us to the Cura Valley and into the large modern albergue at Rubaiyes. There's a pilgrim-friendly restaurant a kilometre further down the road and a small shop for supplies nearby. The next stage of the Camino moves to the border of Portugal and Spain and the twin towns of Valenca and Tui. The walk starts with a gradual but easy climb to San Bento Porta Aberta on paths and minor roads, through woods, and we navigate past some smaller villages with plenty of cafes for that morning pastry. We then descend into the Minho Valley. Eventually, the yellow arrows lead us to cross the river Pedreira via a medieval bridge. And from there, we enter some urban streets. Again, the waymarking can be confusing, and even the locals seem uncertain of the trail.
And then point to the yellow.
Cobbled lanes soon give way to the road leading to Valenca. We head down to this historical frontier town, Valenca do Minho, with its old, imperious and once heavily fortified castle that keeps a careful watch over the Minho River and its Galician counterpart, the town of Tui. There's a large albergue in Valenca that will open its doors to pilgrims late in the afternoon. A pilgrim can decide whether to spend the night in Portugal or cross over to Spain and spend the night in Tui. The large bridge that spans the river is called Eiffel's Puente Internacional, and this structure was built in 1886 by a disciple of the famous Gerard Eiffel. If the decision is made to travel into Spain, the imposing cathedral on top of the town of Tui is the direction to take to reach the albergue. The albergue has room for over 50 pilgrims, and it's situated near the impressive cathedral. The Menu del Dia, translated into English, means meal of the day. This great innovation is a relic of the Franco years, and it was invented to provide an affordable meal for the general population. It's served by most bars, restaurants and eateries, and almost always consists of a three-course meal with a choice of wine or water. And at that, it represents great value for the Camino pilgrim. Tui is the 19th stage of our Camino, and it marks our entry into Spain.
The 20th stage of our Camino is over 30 kilometres long, and a lot of it's taking place through urban areas, on roads and footpaths. On our journey, we navigate through a long industrial section of Operino, a town famous for its export of the Rosa Perino granite, but equally infamous for its lack of yellow arrows to point the pilgrim in the right direction. We must trudge through 7 kilometres of asphalt to pass through this industrial wasteland. Shortly past the bridge, over the railway tracks, there's a signpost to tell the pilgrim he's only 100 kilometres from Santiago de Compostela. Some more street walking heralds our arrival to this large town of Perino, and there's a good albergue here for any leg-weary pilgrims who want to break up their trip. There are millenariums to guide us once we're out of town and away from the busy road. The route passes through the village of Caballeros, and there's another recently built albergue for pilgrims here. On the outskirts of Redondelo, there's a very steep downhill walk, on the road which will test even the strongest pilgrims. The large albergue in the town accommodates 60 pilgrims and has cooking and washing facilities. On the way to Pontevedra, we walk through some pretty nature, switching between narrow tracks and dirt and cobblestone roads. There are some wonderful views of the Rio de Vigo on the descent into the town of Arcade. Rio de Vigo is a stunning 35-kilometre long estuary running from Cape Silero to its deepest point in Arcade. We arrive at a framework of scallop shells, and these are the symbol of the Camino, and they litter the trail as guides to keep the pilgrim heading in the right direction. The elaborate waymark indicates we're on the right track. The main pilgrim albergue is a good 1.5 kilometres before the big city of Pontevedra. It's a very modern building and well equipped with one very large dormitory, a modern laundry and a kitchen, and a large dining room. There are a number of cafes and restaurants nearby for an evening meal. For those travellers who might want some extra comfort, there are a number of reasonably priced hostels beckoning a leg-weary pilgrim further on in the big city of Pontevedra. Pontevedra in ancient Galician means Old Bridge, and on our next day's journey we have to cross the impressive Puente de Burgo as we head northwards. This Roman bridge spans the Loez River, and it's recognised as the symbol of the city itself. The next morning's walk starts along some quiet country paths and lonely roads as it makes its way to the small village of O Castrado. Today will be a pleasant day walking, and a good deal of it spent in the nature. The stage to Caldas del Rey is amongst the flattest so far, and weaves among fields and villages, past evergreen vineyards and farmyards. The sign tells us we're getting very close to our final destination, 40 kilometres to Santiago de Compostela. The large town of Caldas del Rey has a population of over 10,000 inhabitants and has been called the health spa resort of Galicia, boasting some impressive hot springs and spas. The albergue itself is reached by crossing the Rio Umia via an ancient Roman bridge. The large single building can cater for over 40 pilgrims, and the town itself is quite large, with lots of bars and cafes for an evening menu del dia.
Padron is the penultimate stage of this Camino, and it's a very important stage of the Camino Portugues. The walk is mostly through the nature on farm tracks, natural paths. Once the suburbs have been left behind us, the trail enters the Bermana River Valley and eventually the Valga Valley, before following the River Sar into the town itself. Padron takes its name from the legendary Pedron stone. The Pedron is a large ancient stone that Galician history claims the boat carrying the body of St. James was moored up to. The stone itself is kept in the Church of Santiago. Across the river from the church is the 18th century Carmelite monastery, and the municipal albergue is located here. Some pilgrims will travel an extra 10 kilometres to the albergue at Teo and leave themselves a much shorter walk into Santiago the following morning. The albergue at Teo sleeps 24 and has all the facilities for cooking and washing, with a number of bars and restaurants nearby. The final journey to Santiago begins with some pretty nature and dirt paths, through sun-drenched woods with bright nature all around us.
I don't think that's a cathedral.
No, that's...
Nice stick.
Nice.
Eventually, the walker will be on the footpaths as the trail enters the city's suburbs, and our destination looms ever closer. This Camino enters the city of Santiago de Compostela by a different route to the other pilgrimages. Soon, however, we come to the beginning of the Old Town, and before long we enter the large Piazza Obradoiro and witness firsthand the magnificent twin-spired Cathedral of St. James. Our journey is over, and we can finally take our packs off and gaze in awe at this resting place of the Apostle. It's been an amazing journey to arrive here,
but there's still some things that need attending to. Firstly, we must take our credencial to the Pilgrim's office to obtain our Compostela. This document will attest our endeavours and verify that we have completed the pilgrimage. Secondly, we must enter the magnificent church and go through the ritual of hugging the effigy of St. James as a gesture of our appreciation for his help in allowing us to finish our journey. The cathedral is a wonderful spectacle to behold. A pilgrim's mass is held in the church every day at 12 p.m, and this is also a special event for all those who have walked or cycled the Camino. And in the evening, maybe share a celebration with some of the great friends you've made along the way.